I watched a woman with a communications degree and 18 months at the company get promoted to Director of Product Strategy over 3 engineers, each with a master's in computer science, each with 4+ years on the team. I sat in the all-hands where the announcement was made, watched 3 faces cycle through the same sequence: confusion, disbelief, then that tight-jawed silence of someone running math that doesn't produce an answer. Her name, let's call her Priya. The engineers were brilliant, no question. But Priya had something else, something I didn't have a word for at the time. 2 months before the promotion, a budget review meeting. Fluorescent lights buzzing, half the room already checking laptops under the table. The engineering team had built a predictive maintenance system, estimated savings of $2.3 million a year. The lead engineer presented it. 38 slides, technically flawless. The CFO, sharp, not dumb, just not an engineer, asked, "What does this mean for Q3? The engineer paused, restarted from a different angle. More jargon. You could feel the oxygen leaving. The CFO's pen stopped moving. Someone closed their laptop halfway. Priya, sitting 2 seats from the end, quiet the whole meeting, said, "It means we stop paying $190,000 a month to fix machines after they break, because the system tells us which ones are about to break before they do." Net savings hit the profit and loss in Q3. Payback is 11 weeks, 14 seconds. The CFO wrote something down. Budget approved. Not because Priya was smarter, because she could take what lived inside their expertise, $2.3 million locked behind 38 slides, and translate it into 14 seconds the budget holder could act on. The engineers had the knowledge. Priya had the key. And that key was worth more than the vault. Have you seen this happen? Someone with fewer credentials walked out with more authority than the person who did the actual work, and you couldn't explain why? I spent 6 years watching for that pattern. Found it everywhere. The highest paid person in most rooms wasn't the deepest specialist. It was the person who could sit between 2 worlds that don't speak each other's language: engineering and finance, creative and operations, data science and leadership, and make one legible to the other. I started calling it translation fluency, not communication skills. That's too vague, too LinkedIn. Translation fluency is a specific cognitive operation. Hear a complex idea in one field's language, identify the value buried inside the complexity, re-express that value in another field's decision framework, in real time, without dumbing it down. This skill has no degree, no certification, no department, and it pays more than any of those things because every organization has experts who can fill the vault, and almost nobody who can unlock it. Here's where I need to be honest, because I didn't learn this by watching Priya. I learned it by being the opposite of Priya. A Thursday. I'd been working on a content strategy overhaul for 6 weeks, 22 pages, competitive analysis, audience segmentation, channel-specific recommendations. I honestly believed, it was the most thorough strategy document I'd ever produced. Presented it to the leadership team, every recommendation backed by data. When I finished, the CEO said, "This is really thorough. What should we actually do first?" And I froze, not because I didn't know, because the answer was on page 14, paragraph 3. Inside a section called Phase 1 Implementation Priorities, and I couldn't extract it in real time. 6 weeks filling the vault, 0 minutes building the storefront. The meeting ended with, "Let's circle back after you put together a 1-pager. 6 weeks of work reduced to, "Can you make this usable?" I wasn't being dismissed. I was stuck inside my own language. The CEO wanted to act on my work. He couldn't. Nobody in the room, including me, was doing the translation. And that's the economic reality no degree program tells you. Expertise by itself has 0 economic value, not low value. 0. A data scientist who builds a model that would save a company $4 million but can't explain it in language an executive can act on. $0 in organizational value. The model exists, but it's locked inside a technical language that decision makers don't speak. This isn't just a tech problem. The marketing strategist who sees exactly why a campaign will underperform but can't express it in language the creative team can execute against. Locked value. The financial analyst who identifies a risk pattern worth millions but buries it in a 60-page report. Nobody reads past page 4. Locked value. The operations manager who cut processing time by 30% but can't frame the change in language that gets buy-in. Locked. Every case, same structure. The expertise is real. None of it moves until someone translates it from the field where it was generated into the field where it can be acted on. Now think about your own career. That thing you've been told is your weakness. You're a generalist. You know a little about everything but not enough about anything. You need to specialize. That's actually the prerequisite for the most economically valuable skill in the building. You don't need to be the engineer. You need to understand engineering well enough to spot the value buried in the jargon. You don't need to be the CFO. You need to understand financial language well enough to re-express that value in terms the CFO acts on. The specialists fill the vault. Only someone who understands multiple vaults can build the storefront between them. Okay? But how does this actually work? 3 tools. The first one shows you the exact cognitive operation behind every PRIA-level translation you've ever witnessed. If this is clicking for you, if you've watched this pattern happen in meetings and never had the name for it, hit the like button. It helps me know this kind of content is what you need, and it helps other people who've been told they're too scattered find this before another "just specialize harder" video finds them. The advice every specialist gets is, explain it like I'm 5. That advice is wrong, not because simplification is bad, because simplification strips out the substance that makes the knowledge valuable. When you ask an engineer to explain it simply, they remove the technical detail. But the technical detail is the value. You just need it expressed in a different language, not deleted. Priya didn't simplify the predictive maintenance system. She translated it from architecture language into finance language. The information didn't get dumber. It changed languages. Same value. Different vault. 3 steps. The value extraction protocol. Step 1. Identify the vault. In any meeting where an expert is communicating, ask yourself, what does this person know that nobody outside their field can access right now? Not what are they saying. What do they know that their language is preventing from reaching the room? The engineer knew the system would save $2.3 million a year. His 38 slides contained that knowledge. But it was expressed in architecture language, and the room spoke finance. Vault full, storefront closed. Step 2. This is the part that separates translating from paraphrasing. Extract the value line. The single consequence that matters to the person making the decision. Not a summary. The one line that connects expertise to action. The maintenance system presentation had dozens of data points. The value line. This eliminates reactive repair costs of $190,000 a month and pays for itself in 11 weeks. That's the sentence that makes a CFO reach for his pen. Extracting it requires understanding both sides, what the expert built and what the decision-maker needs to hear. This is why generalists are natural translators. You don't need to build the model, but you need to understand it well enough to see the financial consequence hiding inside the architecture. Step 3. Reframe in the target language. Express the value line in the vocabulary your audience uses daily. The CFO thinks in profit and loss impact, payback periods, quarterly targets. The creative director thinks in brand narrative and audience resonance. The operations lead thinks in process time, error rates, adoption friction. Same expert knowledge, translated into each of those languages, sounds completely different, and each version is equally accurate. That's what Priya did in 14 seconds. Heard engineering, extracted the financial value line, spoke finance, budget moved, and here's what nobody tells you. Whoever runs this operation becomes the bridge between the expert who created the value and the decision-maker who can release it. Without the translation, expertise stays locked. You become the person without whom value doesn't move. And the market pays accordingly, so you know the operation. Now the question becomes, where do you run it? Every organization you've worked in was designed with the same blind spot. Departments, engineering, finance, marketing, operations, legal, each with its own language, its own metrics. And between each pair, in the spaces where one team's output needs to become another team's input, there's almost nobody, because that space doesn't have a department, doesn't have a job title. The org chart draws boxes and lines between the boxes. Nobody works on the lines. But the lines are the translation layer, and that layer is where 80% of organizational friction actually lives. The project that stalled because engineering and marketing couldn't agree on priorities? Translation failure. The strategy that died because the data team's insight never reached the executive committee in usable form? Same thing. The product that shipped late because design and engineering were solving different versions of the same problem in 2 different languages? Same thing. Every one of those is a bridge position waiting to be filled. Nobody's filling it because nobody's job title is bridge. 3 questions. The bridge position audit. Question 1. Which 2 teams in your environment have the most friction between them? Where do projects stall, one side consistently feel unheard? That friction isn't a personality clash. It's a language mismatch. 2 groups speaking different professional languages about the same objective. That's your first bridge candidate. Question 2. Where does expert work consistently fail to get the resources or action it deserves? Where do smart people produce valuable work that gets ignored or diluted before it reaches anyone who could act on it? That's locked expertise sitting in a vault with no storefront. That empty layer is your second bridge candidate. Question 3. Who in your environment is already doing this, even informally? The one who gets called into rooms they weren't originally invited to? Look at their trajectory compared to the specialists around them. That's the market pricing the bridge position in real time. Now, here's the strategy. And it's not, ask for a bridge role. Bridge positions aren't posted, they're created. By the person who spots the space, starts translating across it, and becomes essential before anyone realizes what happened. Volunteer for the cross-functional meetings nobody wants. Be the person who, after the engineer presents 38 slides, sends the 2-paragraph summary to the VP who wasn't in the room. Sit between the 2 teams with the most friction and start making each one legible to the other. Within weeks, both sides start routing communication through you. Not because you asked, because you're the only person in the building who speaks both languages. That's the bridge position. It doesn't appear on the org chart. It appears in the dependency structure. And dependency, in any economy, is the purest form of leverage. All right, you understand the protocol, you can see the spaces, but there's a difference between understanding translation and doing it live. And that difference is where the premium lies. You could right now take a technical report and turn it into a 2-paragraph executive summary. That's useful. Not the premium skill. The premium is real-time translation. Hearing the engineer explain sensor architecture in a live meeting and delivering the value line in finance language before the room loses oxygen. That's what Priya did. Not because she was brilliant in some abstract way. Because she was fast. She'd run the operation so many times that the 3-step process happened in seconds. The way someone fluent in 2 spoken languages doesn't translate word by word. They hear in one and speak in another. That speed isn't talent. It's reps, fluency, reps. 1 exercise, daily, 10 minutes. Pick 1 piece of content from a field that isn't yours. A technical email, a data report, a meeting summary from another team. Set a timer for 3 minutes. Extract the value line, the single consequence that would matter to someone in a different department. Then write the translation in 2 sentences or fewer. Not a summary. The value, re-expressed in the target team's vocabulary. That's 1 rep. First week, they'll feel clunky. By week 3, the extraction speeds up. You start seeing the value line before you've finished reading. By week 6, something shifts in meetings. You hear someone explain something complex, and the value line is already forming in your head before you've decided to translate. You've felt the raw version of this before, you just didn't know what to call it. It happens when someone's explaining something complex and the room starts glazing. The slight lean back in chairs, eyes unfocusing, people checking their laps for phones, and something clicks. You see the value. Not all the detail. The value. There's a physical pull, almost, a gathering in the chest, a feeling of, I could say this differently, and everyone would snap back. When you do say it, when you lean forward and the room re-engages, that's translation fluency in its raw form. The reps don't teach you to have that moment. You already have it. They teach you to trust it and act faster. Now step back. Think about the United Nations, a room full of heads of state, the most powerful people on the planet. And the entire operation stops, mid-sentence, mid-negotiation, mid-decision that will alter history, if the interpreters don't show up. Not because interpreters know more about geopolitics, because without them, expertise in one language cannot reach the person who needs to hear it in another. The interpreter doesn't need to be a head of state, they need to speak both languages, and in that role, between two worlds that can't communicate without them, they are the most essential person in a room full of the most powerful people on Earth. Your organization is the same room. Engineering can't talk to finance. Data can't reach strategy. Creative insight doesn't survive the trip to operational language. The interpreter role is open. No title, no degree requirement. You are never scattered, never unfocused, never too generalist. You are building the cognitive architecture for the skill the market values above every specialty. The ability to sit between worlds that don't communicate and make one legible to the other. The specialists fill the vaults. You build the storefront. And the storefront is where the economics are. If you've spent your career feeling like your breadth was a liability, like you should have picked one thing and gone deep, the market has been trying to tell you something you didn't have the framework to hear. And if you're a specialist who's watched less credentialed people leapfrog past you, this isn't about them being better. It's about them occupying a position the org chart doesn't name. Your expertise isn't less valuable, it's locked, and the person who frees it captures the leverage. Here's your first rep. Right now, open your inbox or your most recent Slack messages. Find one message from a field that isn't yours. A technical update, a performance report, a strategic memo. Read it once, then answer this. If you had to explain why this matters to someone in a completely different department, in 2 sentences, what would you say? Write those 2 sentences. Not a summary, a translation. That took less than 5 minutes. And what you just practiced, identifying the vault, extracting the value line, reframing in a target language, is the exact operation that made Priya worth more than 3 engineers in 14 seconds. The difference between you and her right now isn't talent, it's reps. She's run the operation thousands of times. You just ran your first one. Do one tomorrow, and the next day. The speed changes faster than you'd expect. You don't need another credential. You don't need to specialize harder. You need to stand between the fields, where there's no name on any org chart and no ceiling on what it pays, and start making one side legible to the other. The market never underpaid your expertise. It overpaid the person who could translate it, because expertise that can't cross the language barrier between fields stays locked where it was built. Impressive and inaccessible and worth exactly nothing to the person holding the budget. The vaults are full. Every organization you'll ever work in has more expertise than it can use, and almost nobody who can make it usable. Don't fill another vault. Build the storefront. The skill that pays more than any degree isn't deeper knowledge. It's the ability to take deep knowledge and make it move. Tell me what you see. Comment with the 2 fields in your world that can't communicate, and the translation that's been missing between them. Name the vault. Name the target language. Subscribe if this reframed how you think about your career. There's more to unpack about the invisible economics behind promotions and pay gaps that never made sense on paper.